Hello, friends. Welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark,
And I'm Midge Munster.
and today we have a very special treat for all of you. We have a special guest on our podcast today. Now, I know you guys have heard us talk so much about queerness and horror, cult films, and we have a guest today who really embodies all of that. I will get into the full bio so that you get a little bit of everything that she does. So, Peaches Christ is a filmmaker, event producer, and cult leader living in San Francisco. Her infamous movie events are self produced in San Francisco at the legendary Castro Theater before they tour. She also produces and hosts events in partnership with Polyarts Management for symphony orchestras, and her holiday show annually plays London's prestigious Royal Albert Hall. Peaches is a filmmaker, the alter ego of Joshua Grinnell, writer and director of the feature film All About Evil. The award winning dark comedy gore film stars Natasha Lyonne, Thomas Dekker, Cassandra Peterson, Ming Stoll, and Peaches herself. Joshua is the co owner of the Into the Dark production company, which produces immersive theater, including the hugely popular Terror Vault show at the historic San Francisco Mint Building. Peaches has appeared in many films and television shows during her career, and you may have heard of us talking about her amazing shows at Midsummer Scream, which we will talk a little bit about later. But just to get going, I would love to know kind of what your intro horror story is. Have you always been a fan of the unusual and the horrifying? Where did it begin?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I'm glad
Yeah.
to be here.
Jumped right in there. I'm
Yeah, yeah,
Welcome
teasing.
to
yeah.
the show, Peaches.
Thank you. I have been asked this enough without really having a proper answer because I have really not a great memory. Um, I've been asked enough that I've gone to the sources. So I've asked
Ooh,
my parents,
yeah.
and what they say is it's basically like I was born this way because as long as they can remember, as far back as they can remember, I was always into macabre, spooky, weird horror type stuff. So I guess I just have to trust them, and I don't know, maybe it was genetic. I do have a nephew who's turning 5. This December that everyone thinks I'm grooming because he's so into the
Do it.
spookiest stuff. Actually, the only video I've ever had go viral was a video of my wedding where my nephew was the ring bearer as Michael Myers.
Oh
And
my God.
everyone
Yes.
assumes that I dressed him up as Michael Myers. No, no, no. He
Ooh.
was allowed to choose whatever outfit he wanted. And of course, my sister was like, please, please no, because I knew what he would choose. So I didn't even give him the option of Michael Myers. That was all on him, at four
I
and a
love
half
that.
years old. So and he's never seen a Halloween movie. He just knows that Michael Myers is the boogeyman.
Yeah.
So he and I guess, have that in common. I've always liked this stuff.
It's always fun when that pops up again somewhere like generationally in a family and you kind
Yes,
of get your secondary black sheep, I guess.
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, because my brother and sister, I mean, they appreciate it because they grew up with me, but it's
Sure.
not really their thing. And yeah, and I don't have a lot of cousins. I really was the only one until this darling nephew has come along where he's clearly just into it. If he's given the option of like what to wear to school, it's basically like he dresses year round like it's Halloween. He
Good for
always
him.
chooses the
They
sweatshirts
love
with
it.
the skeletons and the all that stuff. Yeah, he likes
Yeah.
it. And I wish I had an influence on him, but I'm in San Francisco and he's in Maryland. And he only sees me a few times a year, so
You're like
it's
Santa
all him.
Claus, though. I'm sure when you come around, it's
Oh,
like the
you should
best
hear him
day of
on the
his
phone.
life.
Yeah, he's always wanting to FaceTime, like, "Uncle Joshua, are you at your haunted house?" And,
Oh, oh
I'll
my
give
God, I
him
love
the
it.
the FaceTime tours of, Terror Vault and, yeah,
Oh
he
my
loves
gosh.
it.
Has he seen Peaches in full drag as well? Or
Yes, yes, and it's
yeah.
funny, he if he sees any drag queen, he's very able to identify that it's drag. He's not very good at identifying the difference. So, he sees Trixie Mattel and he says, "There's Peaches, or whoever, it's all peaches.
Yep, everyone's peaches.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, that's how I feel about drag. I'm just like, everybody is peaches. No.
Right.
Peaches is the end all be all. No.
Right. There we go. I love that.
So coming around to your drag persona, Peaches Christ, correct us if we're wrong, but we're understanding that came about kind of in your college years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
and where did your influences come into that persona in particular? How did you come to be Peaches?
Well, so I grew up in Maryland, and I grew up very, very Catholic.
Mhm.
Although my parents weren't assholes. I always feel like I have to kind of clarify that, because now I look at parents who raise their kids super Catholic, and I'm like, you're an asshole, like,
Period.
but they were. Yeah, anyway, I went to Catholic school, went to church, all that stuff, and grew up in Maryland, and really felt completely alone in a lot of ways because I was queer and weird and dark and spooky and definitely flamboyant and drawn to theater at a very young age. But and I also really was inspired by and loved things that now I would see as being drag or drag adjacent before I was introduced to drag. So Pee Wee Herman and Elvira were
Mm, yeah.
huge influences on me from a very, very young age. But when I really was old enough, junior high was when I discovered John Waters. And the fact that John Waters was making movies where I was growing up blew my mind. I mean, it just completely blew my mind. And Divine was like a revelation. It was almost like,
Yeah.
I just totally changed religion. And, I bailed on Catholicism and went towards the school or the church of John Waters. And because he was also had a lot of religious damage, and also because of his Maryland upbringing, the discovery of him, and then of course drag through Divine, was extraordinary. Coupled with my first trip to the Marley Station Mall to see the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So it was the
Oh,
1-2 punch
amazing.
of Divine and Frankenfurter, that kind of just blew my mind wide open. So, my being Peaches Christ and my love of drag is synonymous with cult movies in many ways. My identity with drag is through cult movies. I of course know that that's a very limited scope of drag, and drag is amazing and huge and wonderful in this big wide. There's that's one of the issues I have with popular drag today, is like it's so
Mhm.
limiting. It's almost like, God, you'd think that with all this popularity and all this um you know uh exposure, we'd have much more um, uh, variety, but it's actually been the
Yeah.
opposite. It's sort of like the outsider queens have kind of been really left on the outside. And so, what I love about Divine and Frankenfurter is that they also fed into my love of films and cult movies.
Penny is our resident shadow caster from so
Ah,
we talk.
Just a one-time engagement, but yeah,
who did you
I
play?
really I played Riff Raff.
Oh, wow, very nice.
So we
I
love
loved it,
to
yeah.
Rocky Horror is a staple here on Ghouls Night. We love
Yes.
to talk Rocky
Definitely a
Horror.
formative experience.
Yes, of course.
I think a lot of us at a young age saw that and we're like, I think there's something different about me.
Yeah. I mean, it's still out there, changing lives. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely.
is. Yeah. And that actually leads in pretty well to kind of my next question, which is it's a very large question, so feel free to take it in any direction you want to go. But just really this intersection of queerness and horror, whether it is outsider queens, queer characters or queer coded characters in horror, or just kind of the queerness of a horror experience. We've talked kind of on this show before about this idea of horror as a genre of survival, which I think relates so strongly to queer experiences.
Hmm.
And I just really love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that it's important for me to look back on my 80s childhood, where my real obsession with Fangoria magazine and consuming all things horror really kicked in, and understanding that there were other people like me who loved horror this way, that there were horror fans, that there were horror conventions. Where it felt strange was I didn't see myself represented
Yeah.
in the genre, and so it wasn't until years later that I started to realize, oh my God, we are here. We've just been hiding in the shadows,
Yeah.
and there's not a minority of us. There's a lot of us, and queer horror has been such an exciting thing for me to sort of really talk about in the last, basically ever since I made All About Evil. I feel like All About Evil, the horror movie I made, unfortunately, uh, was a little too ahead of its time. It was before
Yeah.
people were
Yeah.
talking
I
about
think
queer
so.
horror, and the horror world did not know what to make of it. It was so interesting. You could always tell if a writer was homophobic because of the way they would write about the movie. They didn't know how to not be homophobic when they would write
Hmm.
about it or review it. And now I think, something like All About Evil would be seen differently. It wouldn't have to kind of jump through all the hoops that we had to jump through back then. It was almost like you're not allowed to make this kind of movie because you're not one of us or something.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't allowed to celebrate Herschel Gordon Lewis. Anyway, I'm diverting, but the point is it's changed so much and we're at such a different place. But I do like to go back and realize that the reason I was drawn to horror, and so many of us were, was because we saw ourselves represented in the films, in the stories, in a way that we weren't in other genres. And we were both identifying with, as crazy as this sounds, the victim, who often was the hero, and the monster who could
Hmm.
also be the victim. And so it was and that's why I think Carrie is the one of the most important
Yes.
queer horror movies to look at, because regardless of sexuality, whether Carrie was we don't really know, and who cares, but she was queer. We know that she was
Hmm.
queer. She was treated as if she were queer. We identified with the bullying she received, and we fantasized about the destruction she achieved. And so we could identify both with her being a victim and her being a monster. And I think Carrie, and I also think A Nightmare on Elm Street in many ways, um, it has that, because Freddy, people forget in that original, thing, he was a victim in some ways. He was a terrible person. He was a monster, but he was sassy. He was
Yep.
scary. He had
That's
fabulous,
why I always
yeah.
say it's my favorite franchise because he's an old
Yeah.
queen. Like
Yeah,
I
he's
love
he,
Freddy.
he's like he's a bit, there's some,
He has
yeah,
a
there's
flair
something.
for the dramatic.
Yeah,
Like
the flair for the dramatic. I mean, when she says in that first movie, which is so scary and so effective, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, and he says, "This is God." I mean, that's just like that's for queer people. Taking the power away from religion even was important,
Yeah.
but more than that, the feminist character of Nancy being the person who goes to the library and reads the books and figures out how to make the booby traps. And, it's not Johnny Depp who saves the day. It's Heather
Yes.
Langenkamp. I think as queer people, we really identify with Nancy. She was the nerd. She wasn't the pretty blonde. She wasn't Johnny Depp, but she was the one who, at the end of the day, had to grow the thick skin and save her ass. And that's very much the queer experience.
absolutely. Oh, uh, that I'm just like nerding happy right now. That was you touched on all my favorite things.
A little bit of a change, but also still the same topic. I just would really love to hear more about Terror Vault and kind of your passion for live events.
Hmm.
I feel like you're definitely someone who really has put a lot of energy, obviously, into these live experiences, and just kind of what draws you to that as a form of creative expression.
Sure. I for sure was drawn to storytelling, and that's where my love of theater and film come from, and also being flamboyant and loving horror
Yes.
and loving theater. And so growing up, like, I did haunted houses. As a kid I was obsessed with haunted houses. I grew up uh like I said, in Maryland, where I spent summers at a place called Ocean City, and we had a little home on the boardwalk. And at the end of the boardwalk, there was a Bill Tracy dark ride called the Haunted House that I
Oh
grew up
my gosh.
going through every summer. It's still there. It's still incredible. It's actually where my nephew became obsessed with Michael Myers, because
Awesome.
some guy dresses up as Michael. I mean, so smart of them, even though I, of course, the artistic part of me is like, Bill Tracy would never have had Michael Myers walking around the haunted house, but, it sells more tickets to have someone, but there was this other walk-through haunted house that was huge on the pier down there called Morbid Manor. And I, as a kid, was such a freak that I would go down there. Also, it was the 80s, so I'm very, very Gen X. So you could be like 8 years old and basically just, walk
Just go
anywhere in a
off.
city.
Yeah.
Yeah. you know, so I would go, I would, ride my bike down to the end of the boardwalk and sit and stare at Morbid Manor and just watch them activate the haunted house, and watch as these butt rock, Metallica loving teenagers would wear ghoul makeup and dress in, ghoul cloaks and scare everyone on the pier. And, it was bliss. It was heaven. I was completely drawn to that and obsessed with it. I also was terrified by it. So on
Yeah.
one hand, I was fascinated by it and in love with it, but also too scared to go in Morbid Manor, so I love the storytelling. I also completely, I'm both a creator of it and also a fan of it. So when I go to other haunted houses, I am screaming. I am terrified. When I go see a scary movie, I am definitely along for the ride. So yeah, I've always loved this stuff. So for me, theater, haunted houses, filmmaking, all of it. Sometimes it all works in tandem with each other. Terror Vault in this last year, I did a lot of film that was projected
Hmm.
as part of the experience. I see it all as kind of being the same thing. So whether it's a feature film like All About Evil, or an immersive haunted attraction like Terror Vault, or one of my parody shows at Midnight Mass, on stage at the Castro Theater, for me, it all comes from the same place. So I see it as the same wheelhouse. But I think
Yeah.
for other people, especially, I have friends who are like, they're filmmakers. They make movies. That's what they know. That's the world. They're, I'm sure, much better at it than I am. They are prolific filmmakers. I'm not, but they see me as being they don't get it. Like, whereas I look at them and go, wow, that's such an accomplishment. I can't believe you make a fucking movie every few years. Well, my thing is just like uh I'll do a symphony show, I'll do a Terror Vault, I'll do a movie or whatever. So it's all the same stuff. I don't know how to explain it other than, for me, it's seemingly the same.
Well, and that's something I think that comes with a theatrician's background in a lot of ways, is that we kind of learn to be those jacks of all trades and
Right.
find, like, if the art you want to see is not being made, you find ways to make it in different venues. And that's something I really admire about your career, is I feel like you have this very solid sense of self that you've infused into all these many different
Hmm.
projects, and it's so cool to behold. I know it's funny that you mentioned you were too scared to go into the manor, because Penny and I are also like notoriously scaredy cats. um,
Very wimpy.
and so like I've been stalking the Terror Vault stuff from this year because the production looked so amazing, and I was like, I want to go so bad, but I know I would probably pee my pants.
You'd be fine. You'd be fine.
Do they
It's
have
all
those
the it's all
little
the
light up
psychology.
bracelets like for kids?
Yeah. Oh, no, we actually have our light up thing is it makes it worse. So if you wear the
Oh, is it like the
yeah,
touch pass
yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing?
So if you wear the interactive red glow necklace, it indicates that you want more interaction.
And I do not.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of live events, Penny and I, as we mentioned at the top, have had the opportunity to see you perform both in Night of the Living Drag and then Return of the Living Drag at Midsummer Scream the last couple years. Could you tell us a little bit about how you brought that cast of people together and what the future of that possibly looks like moving forward?
Sure. Well, Midsummer Scream is, this fabulous convention that really isn't like any other convention I've ever been to, and I point that out because if you're like me and you've done horror conventions for 40 years, you do start to feel like they're a lot alike.
Yeah.
And you kind of see the same things, and meet the same people, and Lord knows I'm one of those people who could pop for a while was popping up at those conventions, and I am so grateful I got to do some with Elvira for a time. I mean, nothing better. Talk about homophobia. That was always amazing. I remember being in Indianapolis and Peaches and Elvira at a horror convention where people would just act as if I was invisible.
Oh
But
my God.
again, this is before
Yeah.
queer horror, and kudos to Cassandra for insisting I come along.
Yeah.
Um, but those conventions, while I love them, it's a lot of the same. So when Midsummer Scream came along, and I know that I attended it after it had already happened, and I know that they were born from another convention. Like there's a history there.
Yeah.
Um, but what I love about Midsummer Scream is that it's Halloween focused, and because it's Halloween focused, and it's not industry focused like something like Trans World. Um, it's it's just really unique. It's really special. It's for fans of Halloween and everything that comes along with Halloween. So a component of that um, are haunted attractions. Another component is just all the wonderful things that people do to celebrate Halloween, whether it be in apparel or accessories. It's got the big folks down to the little folks. So you've got home haunters, but you also got Universal Studios there. I just love it.
Hmm.
I think it's so
Yeah.
fabulous. And Southern California is the epicenter for all things Halloween. And so it's got this fan base that can support it. I don't know that there's many places in the country where you could do something like Midsummer Scream and have the turnout that they have,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just really special. And we showed up because our friend Norm at Horror Buzz is very involved in putting on Midsummer Scream. And so Norm invited us when Terror Vault was just getting started, just to kind of go down there and sort of make a splash at the Horror Buzz booth. And then over the years, that evolved to the point where it landed us on stage at what it was the Night of the Living Drag, doing
Hmm.
a drag show, and then Return of the Living Drag, which is also a testament to the shift in queer horror that we've seen. So yeah, it's been really incredible to be a part of that. And as far as I know, we'll be back next summer with something. I'm guessing it'll be Return of the Living Drag again. Now that
Hmm.
we're in the return phase, but we did get news from Midsummer Scream, which is incredible. That we, out of everything, they do some sort of like exit poll, I guess, for ticket
Hmm.
buyers.
Yeah.
We were rated the most beloved or highest rated event of the whole weekend,
Hell yeah.
which is amazing. Like,
Yep.
what? Are you kidding?
It was so, I mean, Midge and I both like both years, it was such a highlight, and we were so excited to see it move to the main stage for the second year, cuz it was just an incredible show. And like you said, it's so cool to see queer performers and drag put on the main stage at this kind of event.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a continuing testament to the fact that our community is queer.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah, for
it's
sure.
Mhm.
so I Penny knows I'm such a softie, and like this year with it being on the main stage, and when here we're in the heat of everything that happened this summer with the everything about people being horrible about drag and making things problems that aren't problems, and
Yeah.
using drag as a scapegoat. And to see that room not only full in the seats, but then people standing in the back, people waiting in the hall to get in, and I was crying in the audience. I was like,
She
"This
did
is,"
cry. I
I
saw it.
did.
Yeah, it
It's
was
like this
great. I mean,
is,
so it's funny, the first year that we did it 2 years ago, they had us in a medium-sized room, and
yeah,
they knew going into it that it was going to be popular because I guess the way their app or something is set up, people can indicate what they're interested in. And
Hmm.
and so the Midsummer Scream folks were saying to me, maybe we should move it to the big room. And I actually said, let's not, because if it's as popular as we hope it will be, the best thing that could happen is you turn some people away. The worst thing is you move it to the big room prematurely,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
you've got drag queens, because that big room is huge. I mean,
It's
it's
Yeah.
giant. Yeah.
massive. So, you know, 500 people in a room that fits 1,200 doesn't feel nice.
Right.
So it was. I'm glad that it worked out the way it did, and the fact that I mean, we had standing room only this past year, and the big room was
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the queens are
Congratulations.
also good. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
to answer your question about that, that's just the luxury of now having worked in the queer horror, drag horror
Hmm.
arena for so long, that all these folks sweetly see me as some sort of I don't know, something of note, I guess. And so they show up and want to do a good job, and they're really that's really an art for art's sake project. I mean, not to reveal too much, but the budget is not so great. So everyone
Hmm.
on that stage is performing because they want to be there. They want to show the horror fans their stuff, and it's the audience you want. And I think sometimes people forget, like, we do a lot of gigs where um we're underappreciated because um you know whatever, it's some gig hires you for an audience where maybe a small percent actually care that you're there. But
Yeah.
for a queen who is into Halloween and horror to perform on stage, myself included, at Midsummer Scream is a dream come true, because every single person sitting in that room is into the same shit you are.
Yes.
It's totally exciting. So yeah, they're amazing, an amazing group of performers, and we try to mix it up so that it's SoCal queens with NorCal queens. And of course, by queens, I'm using that as an umbrella term. I also
Yes.
brought one of my drag children down, who's a drag king, Cosimo, this past year. So drag in the widest scope, in all its diversity, we try to present.
Well, again, congratulations on the show. We love it. And if do you, I'll if you have this still, we'll plug it. Do you still have the merch on your site
No, it's
available?
sold out.
Oh.
It's sold
Yeah,
out.
the
Okay,
Return of
I
the
was gonna
Living Drag
say.
shirt, it sold out that weekend, which was so amazing.
Well, that's Penny and I both got like 4 X's or something because that was the only thing
Oh,
that's
right.
left.
Yeah,
But
that
now
was
we
all.
were just talking like 2 days ago that it's our
Sure.
favorite shirt. We wear it around the house all day because it's just like
Yes. So
comfy
good.
wumpy.
Amazing. Oh, perfect.
Awesome. So we've talked a little bit already about cult films. Obviously, from live screenings to your podcast, that's something that you have a deep passion for. So I would just love to hear what you think makes a great cult film, and what makes us keep coming back to some of these movies.
Well, this is something we talk about a lot on my Midnight Mass
Hmm.
podcast. And so I will say that people have different definitions for what a cult film is and what it can be. And so mine is unique, and I'm not the end all be all, that's for sure. So in my mind, the way I've kind of embraced my own definition over the years is for it to include, obviously, something that a large group of people love, um and love in a specific way, not just are fond of in a pop culture. I'm a passing fan of it, but more like love, like this film has become something I worship,
Yeah.
and I worship at the altar of this film, and I know every word, and I watch it repeatedly over and over again. I think that's one thing. Now, where I think the definition changes in order for it to be cult is if it's something along the lines of Star Wars, or something that's got a huge, massive
Hmm.
box office and long time loyal following, and always has, I'm less likely to call it cult. So things like Star Wars or Harry Potter, or while I get it, there is a cult around it for sure. because it's so popular, I'm less likely to embrace it as a cult film.
Mhm.
So I think of these things as something a little more niche, a little more transgressive, typically a lot more queer, and by that I don't mean gay, but
Yeah.
I mean queer. And so my definition tends to be um, still pretty broad when it comes to cult movies, because you've got people who are like, nope, if it didn't play at midnight, if it's not,
Yeah.
Eraserhead or Pink Flamingos, then it's not. I'm not that for sure, but I definitely, on our podcast, we've covered things that people are surprised by. We've covered Anti-Mame, for example, and the reason I feel like Anti-Mame in many ways gets more cult over the time is because now it's a film that's passed down generationally and it's
Mhm.
shared amongst a niche, and it's worshipped by a very specific group of people. So yeah, I think Anti-Mame qualifies, but there are some people who would say no, the Anti-Mame's not a cult film. So it really depends on what your definition is, and then there's obviously
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
easy ones we all know are cult films.
Do you
Yeah,
have
I actually was just listening the other day, to your episode about Cabaret, and I
Oh
really
yeah.
enjoyed kind of the conversation of the same sort of thing you said about Anti-Mame now, and that, even if something was popular in the time, it can kind of develop this cult connection with an audience.
And with the both those, I think the obvious thing is I'm coming at it from a very specifically queer point of view.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
those movies hit a different way for queer audiences. And while they were great movies, Silence of the Lambs, I think, is another one where I would call it cult. And it had a popular, I mean, it swept the Academy Awards. It
Yeah.
had a huge box office, but there's a specific way that it's kept alive and a specific kind of way that people love it that to me
Mhm.
makes it cult. And again, this is just me going with my gut. I'm no expert. Well, maybe I
Yeah.
am an expert. I don't know,
I
but
think you're an expert. I would call you an expert.
but you know what I mean? I feel like there's just certain things. Silence of the Lambs is not something that should have become a cult movie, and yet it did. Whereas Star Wars or Harry Potter, we knew that they knew that's why they spent $1 billion on
right?
Yeah.
them.
They're popular IPs that
Yeah.
they know people are gonna.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so Penny is a Silence of the Lambs
I'm a big Silence of the
girly.
Lambs
She's
fan.
got the tattoo. She's got the and
What tattoo?
she's got her
Just,
moth.
I've got a little of like a cute death head moth.
Oh gosh. Wow, you really are a big
I
fan.
am a big fan.
But we had a
You're
whole episode
fucked.
where Penny brought the topic of Silence of the Lambs to the pod, and I had never seen the film. This was just last year. So
No.
I
I
got to watch
know.
it as an adult for the first time, and as somebody who, has only been comfortable in their queerness for, say, 5 to 7 ish years. So I got to see it through a queer person's lens as an adult. And
Yeah.
I was texting her. I was like, "This is the best movie I've ever seen. Why is no one talking?"
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I would lean to agree with you that
For
yes, it's
sure.
absolutely a cult film, especially to those who really are feral about it for a particular reason.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that to this day, memes of Precious exist and, people still get so excited. I mean, okay, I'm old enough that I specifically remember seeing it on opening night
Oh,
at the
wow.
Annapolis Mall. And also remembering that it was the breakout of the Gulf War, and we didn't know if the movie would take place because this is now, being at war is so normal for our country. But back
Yeah.
then, it had been some time. My generation hadn't grown up with war. Previous to that was Vietnam, so I didn't really grow up. But remembering that the Gulf War had just started, and we were also kind of rattled by that. And a friend of mine saying, "Oh, we should go see this movie." I knew nothing about the movie other than Jodie Foster was in it. That was who I know. I didn't even know who Anthony Hopkins was.
Yeah.
And I will never forget, first of all, the movie just blowing my mind, but I will never forget the point where he puts those night vision goggles on at the end and me sitting in the theater thinking, how embarrassing is it going to be if I can't watch? Like I was so terrified. I was so
Yeah.
in that basement with them. I was so there that I almost thought I might not be able to continue watching the movie. And that really, I mean, only a few times in my life have I felt that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even now, I mean, I again used to be scared of everything. Didn't watch horror for many, many years, and now have been catching up on it as a teenager and adult. But like watching that last year, I'm now kind of pretty desensitized to most things because horror has gone so far, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
in present day, and the way that that constructs suspense and things is just something that I hadn't felt watching a movie in a long time. It's very, very good.
Genius.
So good.
Genius. Yeah.
Didn't mean to make this a Silence of the Lambs spot
The Silence
again,
of the
but
Lambs
man,
cast.
so good.
Never a problem.
Well, since we are on the topic of cult films, I want to take a moment to talk about your contribution to the cult canon. You've mentioned All About Evil a couple of times here, and we talked a bit about it in the intro of the episode. But I would just love to let you speak about it for a little bit, because this started as a short film that you made called Grindhouse that
Hmm.
you, I believe, made to premiere at the San Francisco Underground Short Film Festival.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it developed into this feature-length film. You've got a star-studded cast. Can you tell us a little bit about how that process was for you, coming from Grindhouse to feature-length, and just also with the film being re-released last year and brought to Shudder, how that's been?
Yeah, it's been amazing. As far as it's sort of continuing to creep and crawl its way across the world and find its fans. That's been lovely. But I mean, I think because when I got into drag and because of the drag that I was interested in, it's hard to remember, especially if you're younger than I am, but drag was not popular. Like, drag was not something that you did to have a successful career. It wasn't um, something that the gay community was fond of, especially at the era that I grew up in,
Mhm.
when marriage equality was the thing that people were most interested in. So drag queens were very much on the fringe. And so I think by the point where in the 1995, 96, when I kind of become really into being Peaches Christ and performing as Peaches Christ, I think, my dreams of being a feature filmmaker kind of had sailed, because it was kind of like, I'm going to do this now, and,
Yeah.
and realizing that doors were going to shut for me as a young person, but that my love of being a punk rock, drag performer was too great. So point is, I wasn't really setting out to make a feature film starring Natasha Lyonne. Like, that didn't
Yeah.
seem like it was in the cards for me. And I started making short films, like drag parody horror movies that were just silly and no budget. I had no money. I wasn't able to afford stuff. So it was just like silly short drag movies, parodies of things like Halloween. And one of them, I forget why, but I decided that I wanted to see if I could make a movie that didn't have Peaches at the head of it and play it at midnight mass, and would it still be able to draw an audience? And I also started this film festival for overlooked underground filmmakers, and that's why I made Grindhouse. It was just sort of like an experiment for myself, and I do appear in the movie, but as a news reporter out of drag. And a lot of people at the time didn't know that that was Peaches, because this is back then. Like, people really didn't know what you looked like out of drag. There wasn't
Yeah.
reality TV. We were really different people. So, I could walk around San Francisco and, I could have an argument with someone wearing a Peaches Christ shirt and they had no idea. Um, so anyway, I did that. And then Midnight Mass had become popular enough that Mark Cuban reached out to me about doing a TV show. And so he produced this TV show called Midnight Mass that was a televised version of my live event. They would film the live event, and then this TV show would run before uninterrupted screenings of HD versions of the cult movies I picked out. And because of Mark and his support of me, I ended up really deciding that I don't know, that's maybe someday I could make a feature film. It was really, I think, because Mark gave me that faith in myself. And I mean, I hate to sort of make it sound like I uh needed a straight rich white guy to give me self-confidence, but I will say that what did help, it definitely
I say it
helped.
doesn't
Yeah.
hurt.
No, and it gave me the motivation to sit and write a script, which took a few years. So I wrote the script and then I asked Mark for the money and he didn't give me the money, but it was enough. It was enough of a, but he did help distribute the film.
Okay.
But it was enough of a motivation that it got the script done, and the script was good enough that it attracted talent. And, because of Midnight Mass and doing the live events, I was already friends with people like Mink Stoll and Elvira. And I basically um, was able to, put enough of a cast together that I was, able to get the movie financed by someone else. And then All About Evil was made, and then we went on tour with All About Evil, and and then it kind of disappeared for a while, and then it came back. Severin released it on a very special Blu-ray last year, and Shudder has it now, so it's been
Mhm.
really lovely.
It's definitely fun to see it kind of have that cult film trajectory, with that
Yeah.
being kind of your background. Now, seeing, we actually heard about it from a friend of ours, funnily enough, because of my hair, because of my blonde streaks and the
Ah,
red.
yes, yes, yes.
Our friend Matt of Hallowoods, he was like, "You guys got to watch All About Evil," and thankfully Shudder brought it to our doorsteps. So
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, the
it's
Shutter
definitely going to
Shutter thing has
continue to
been
grow.
so great because much like Midsummer Scream, All About Evil on Netflix would be great, but it being on Shutter is even better in some ways for me because it's it's the kind of movie that's not for everyone. I
Yeah.
know that. I made
Yeah.
it for a specific group of people, and I didn't set out to make it cult because that's impossible. The fact that anyone considers it cult is wonderful to me. But I made it because I made it just like I make everything else. I made it for myself in a way.
Yeah.
It's like Terror Vault. It's like what you described. I create stuff that I would enjoy, that I would be a fan of, which I realize is not the way you do a blockbuster. And so on Shutter, it's more likely to find, and it has found an audience that really gets it. So I'm glad that you were able to see it on Shutter.
Yes.
Yeah, promo to any of our listeners out here who haven't seen it yet, go watch it on Shudder. It's really fun.
Or get the
I
Severin Blu-ray and you
or
get all
yes,
the
or
extras. Yeah.
get the Blu-ray for all
Yes.
the extras. Watch it first while you're waiting for the Blu-ray to
Yes.
come. There you go.
The
I
Blu-ray
feel like
was really incredible because they
yeah.
really rolled out the red carpet. Like I was shocked by the way they did that Blu-ray. Like it's 2 discs. The second disc is the soundtrack, on a
The
CD.
Vincentos,
Then
yeah.
and then there's a book that they included with Michael Varotti's journals. Michael Varotti was a kid who came on tour with us on his own dime to document the tour. That's how
Oh,
I met
wow.
Michael. He was a fan who came on the tour with us, and he was fabulous. So they put all of his journal entries into a book, and then they made 2 new documentaries, a new commentary track. It has Grindhouse included on it. It's just an amazing Blu-ray. So I do like promoting. I don't like promoting a lot of stuff, but when
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to promote something, but you love what you're promoting, it makes it a lot easier.
It is.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, I feel like there has been such a loss of, like, special features with movies now
Yeah.
in, like, the age of streaming. I'm like, I miss features, I miss director commentary, so that is definitely a good thing to check out to get
Yeah.
all the goods.
And especially now, it's our genre that's keeping it alive. It's our,
Yeah.
it's our fandom. So what's nice is it doesn't really exist anymore for the popular stuff, but for the weird stuff, these Blu-rays, these special things. If you follow Vinegar Syndrome or Severin, they are doing an awesome job of putting this stuff out. Shout Factory, so it's really our genre that keeps this stuff
Yeah.
going.
And if any of our listeners do not have the materials at home to get a Blu-ray and watch it, I do believe Peaches is Grindhouse still on your Patreon page as well.
Oh gosh, is it? Maybe, I don't know. Uh, it was on our Patreon page, huh? Then it
It
must be. I wouldn't
was.
have taken it off. Yeah. So
Okay, so
yeah.
go
So we.
support Peaches on
Yeah.
Patreon, support
Yeah.
Midnight Mass, her
Yeah.
podcast, and if you'd like to see the original film that All About Evil became or came from Grindhouse, you can find that over on Patreon. You might have to scroll, but
Perfect. Yes. Exactly.
Awesome. So we've had such a great conversation today, but we know that you have a holiday show upcoming. You
Yes.
want to tell the people about that?
Sure. In a strange turn of events, some years back, was invited to do a show at the San Francisco Symphony, and that caught the attention of a conductor in Chicago, Edwin Outwater, who reached out to me, and he's since moved to San Francisco. But he and I partnered and created a holiday show called Holiday Gaiety that we've done at in San Francisco now for many years. And that show became popular enough that we created two more shows. One's called Symphony of Terror, and another one is called Symphonic Pride. And yeah, we are getting ready for our holiday season. And it's surreal to me. And the reason I give you all the backstory is because I'm doing the show for the second year at the Royal Albert Hall in London.
amazing.
And I have
So
to,
cool.
I
So
feel like I have to
cool.
explain it because people,
How
especially my,
did we get
yeah,
here?
well, especially my British friends, I mean, they really do think I'm fucking with them because it is insane that there's a Peaches Christ show, happening at Royal Albert Hall. But I do have Edwin to thank for it. I mean, Edwin comes from a very elite world of being a conductor of the greatest symphonies in the world, and he went to Harvard, but Edwin's that really cool interesting artist who wants to do interesting things, and he's a queer person who saw what I was doing. It's kind of like the Mark Cuban thing in a way, who said, "Hey, I see what you're doing and I'm interested in it." And so
Yeah.
Edwin reached out to me and said, "I think we should partner up." And we did, and now we're represented by a management group in London who book very prestigious venues. So here we are. So I have the Royal Albert Hall show. They call it a Christmas Gaiety because in England you don't say holiday, you say Christmas.
Oh.
I mean, it's kind of like the birthplace of Christmas, I guess.
Yeah.
And we do that in London on the 12th, and then we go and do it in Gateshead, England, which is near Newcastle, on the 13th. We fly back to San Francisco on the 14th, and we do it in San Francisco on the 15th.
Oh
And
my goodness.
and then next year, because these things take, like, symphonies book out years in advance. So
Yeah.
next,
I used to work for a symphony for
okay,
6 years.
yeah, so then which
That's
one
my
did you work
lore.
for?
The Kansas City Symphony.
I'll have to find out if they're going to book us. But they,
Call me. I'll get you in there.
okay, yeah. I will. So yeah, well, the management group is called Polyarts. That's who books us. So
Yeah.
if anyone listening works with symphonies and they're interested, reach out to Polyarts. But next year, I know that we're already booked in a number of cities. Like, it's almost like I don't
Nice.
think we could be booked anymore. And those bookings all happened a few years ago. So it's an interesting thing to watch where they start scheduling you. Like right now, I'm being scheduled for 2025. Because
Wow.
symphonies
Yeah.
plan out so far in advance. Yeah.
That's amazing. If you could go back and tell young Peaches that she was going to be playing Royal Albert Hall.
I probably, I don't know. I mean, because as a young person, what I obsessed over was Susie and the Banshees at Royal Albert Hall.
Oh
And I
yeah.
was
Yeah.
also an Anglophile. Not even intentionally. I didn't even know I was, but because of their embrace of gender expression, people like Boy George were allowed to be Boy George. David Bowie, Vivian Westwood, the punk rock movement. My favorite bands were Susie and the Banshees, New Order, Depeche Mode. I was so obsessed with all that stuff that Royal Albert Hall, to me, it was the creme de la creme of where you
Mhm.
got, like, I remember everyone making a big deal out of Susie being there. And to me, Susie is a goddess. So
Right.
if you told me that Peaches Christ was going to be headlining Royal Albert Hall, I would have. I don't even know that my brain could have processed that.
Just
First of all, I probably would have been like, "Who's Peaches Christ?" Yeah.
well, good for her. Who's that?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, besides that amazing opportunity to tour with
Yeah.
these symphonies and things, what else is next for Peaches?
Well, right now I'm actually planning. You're the first to know about this. I do a show I was planning to do more frequently before the pandemic. With John Waters superstar Mink Stoll, and she and I do a cabaret show together, and we were gonna do it more often, and then the pandemic happened. So
Mhm.
we've just booked a northeastern um, tour, and we're going to be taking it to different territories around. But I can say now definitively that in February we'll be going to. Well, we're starting in San Francisco, doing a couple nights here of our idol worship show, and then we'll be doing Salem. I've never done anything in Salem,
Ooh.
Massachusetts.
Ah,
Of course,
exciting.
I'm excited to be there. Providence, Rhode Island, New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. So that's all coming up in February. And then, of course, more Terror Vault and more symphony
Mhm.
shows. And hopefully, we're working on a new movie. So, we'll see.
Oh, so
Exciting.
Yeah.
exciting.
Well, bring that show to Kansas City. We don't get enough drag here. Bring it to Milwaukee to Penny.
Yeah, Milwaukee will
You
take it
know,
too.
let's talk because I'm doing it regionally so that I mean Mink is she likes to remind me, so I don't feel bad saying this. Mink is constantly reminding me, Peaches, I'm a 75-year-old woman. This is you're at, and I'm like, okay. So what I'm doing is a couple weeks, and then we take a chunky
Yeah.
break, and then a couple weeks, and so
Well,
I
your
think
daughter was just here at the theater I used to work at, so I think you have to come do it.
which one I
The
was
Folly.
was it no which daughter?
Daughter.
Oh, Miss Jenks.
Okay, yes, of course. Oh yes, okay, with her concert.
With yeah, no, everything at stake.
Oh yeah, that was great. I saw that a
Yeah.
couple times. Yeah. So good. Well, yes, let's connect outside of the show because um I actually love going places where they're less likely to have seen Mink because she's performed so
Mhm.
much in the big cities. And so I feel like there's this John Waters fandom is so massive and so unique, and um they're the first to tell you they're getting older, so that's kind of why I'm pushing her to do more touring now, is sort of like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
let's do it, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's getting better here, but the Midwest is a drag desert. We get skipped a lot by a lot of those tours and
but
things.
but our weirdos are there, our
We
fans,
sure
you know what
Weird
I
freaking
mean.
queen.
and
are.
and so and I only, Mink and I are doing, this is an intimate show, like we book 200 seat venues, or around there,
Nice.
so it's
Yeah.
like we make it, we anyway, well, let's talk. We'll talk, and
Yeah.
we'll plan something. Yeah.
Yes.
No, you have
I
to
love that
commit right
podcast just
You
now.
commit
evolves
right
into a
now.
business
Tell us.
meeting. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Peaches,
Thanks for
for
having
making the
me.
time to come talk to us. This has been awesome. And if you are a listener who is new to the Peaches Christ cult, will you let the listeners know where they can follow you online?
Well, I have on my this is the easiest thing. And I don't know why I don't promote it more often. My link tree, link
oh
tree,
yes.
my Peaches Christ link tree. If you Google that, because it has the links to all this crap, including all my social media. So, and if you can't find my link tree, it's the link on my Instagram page at the Peaches Christ. But it'll have the links to my merch and the different shows and Terror Vault and all that stuff.
Amazing. Well, yes, head
Everything you
that.
could need.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
All right. Well, Penny, that was amazing to get the
So
opportunity
amazing.
to chat with an absolute drag legend, a horror legend. Very, very exciting. I think for me, I don't know about you, but it was very fun to get to hear Peach's perspective on horror movies that I love, like Carrie and
Mhm.
Nightmare on Elm
Yes.
Street. That was probably a highlight for myself if I if I had to pick.
Yes, oh my gosh, I feel like we talked about absolutely everything. I mean, you've got wide-ranging topics when you're kind of a Renaissance woman who's got her fingers in so many different things. So thanks again, Peaches, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Penny and I talked a bit about this at the beginning of the episode, that I guess this is technically our Thanksgiving episode. So we're
Hey!
happy Thanksgiving. We're very thankful for this opportunity to chat with Peaches, and we're thankful for all of you listening. And
Mhm.
if you want to show how thankful you are for this podcast, the best way you can do that for us is by leaving a rating or a review wherever you listen. If you are not able to leave a review where you catch us on your podcatcher of choice, you can always submit a review via Instagram DM, or Spotify now allows comments. And I believe our review comes from a Spotify comment today.
It sure does. This comment's from Ronnie B, who says, I love every single thing about these lovely spooky ghouls. I look forward to listening every Tuesday. I learn such fun and interesting things. Keep up the spooktacular work. With hand hearts and also a rainbow, which seemed appropriate for a very queer episode of Ghouls Night In.
Yes. If this is the Ronnie I believe it is, Ronnie is from my neck of the woods as a
Hey,
St. Louis
Ronnie.
ghoul, and he and his partner is also an amazing drag artist,
I
and a musician as well. So
didn't even know
that's,
how perfect it
I know,
was.
it ended up being perfect. If you would like more content from us, or to submit your own Instagram review, you can find us over there at Ghouls Night In Pod. And if you're looking for me, you can find me across the web at Midge Munster.
And you can find me at Penny Snark. And until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.